This is the Unstarving Musicians Podcast. I'm your host, Rabanzo. This podcast features conversations with me and indie music artists. Conversations intended to help other indie musicians be better at marketing, business, the creative process, and all the other things that empower us to do more of what we love. Make music. So, as you know, I love sharing my personal experience and the things I'm learning from other musicians and songwriters here on the podcast. And you also know that you can be privy to those learnings by joining the Unstarving Musician community. In the process, you probably also know you'll be supporting this podcast. Just go to unstarvingmusician.com to join. In doing so, you'll get an email from me usually every 7 to 10 days with tips, hacks, insights, tricks, all the things you need to know to make your music journey a little better and brighter. And you'll also get a free gift from me, a token of my appreciation for being part of the Unstarving Musician movement. I found Bradford and Kimberly Loomis through a kind referral made by Shannon Curtis. She has also been featured on this podcast, and you can find her episode or a link to her episode in the show notes for this one. Thank you, Shannon. Bradford and Kimberly are of the dynamic duo or married couple variety. Kimberly is highly involved in Bradford's career, providing everything from tech support to photography. She also co-writes with Bradford. Our conversation opens with how Bradford was thrust back into music following economic change and a job loss. It sounds like it's turned out to be the best career choice that's ever been forced upon him, or that he's made. He has a weekly live broadcast program on Facebook on which he performs, hosts guest interviews, and interacts with his growing community. Bradford sees these broadcasts as a channel for supporting others as much as he sees it for sharing his music. Cutting out the middleman is a primary focus for Bradford and Kimberly, and my favorite example of this is that they host their own subscription platform for patrons. This is in lieu of Patreon, a wildly popular platform for subscription-based communities. They also created their own recording label. We discuss all of this, plus their entrepreneurial take on the business of music, Bradford's music mastermind group, house shows, also known as house concerts, how his partnership with Kimberly is making a difference in his career, and much more. You will hear the track Across the Divide at the conclusion of our chat, a song that comes from his latest album, Live at the Red Clay Foundry. I love this song. Bradford has got some pipes, I tell you. Here is my conversation with Bradford and Kimberly Loomis. In no particular order, I'm just going to kind of rando here, ask questions that I have for you. And at the top of my list, only, not really at the top, that I was just dying to answer it, but I just noticed the word entrepreneur on your Facebook profile, Brad, and I wanted to just ask, what does that mean in your lives, you and Kimberly's lives?
Oh, well, we kind of fumbled our way into a music career in an interesting fashion, I think. I'd given up music for about 10 years with any level of ambition about it. I was still writing and still playing at home, and I would play at church and that sort of thing, but I wasn't playing out. I had no level of ambition. And then we bought a house, and I had a pretty decent job, and the Great Recession hit. I lost that job. We were struggling to maintain the house, so I started playing music a little bit more, helped supplement the income, and that kind of got me back into pursuing music, and it was, helping me to deal with all the stress and whatnot of the situation we found ourselves in. And we ended up losing the home, it really pushed me into music, and I was immediately struck with the thing I love about music in terms of a career is that it really is responsive to what you put into it, you get out of it. And so that started me down, because I started so late, because I had a family, because of our financial situations, I didn't have a lot of time to mess around. So I immediately started trying to figure out how to run it as a business. Mm-hmm. And that really kind of pushed me towards more of an entrepreneurial pursuit of it. So we had to learn how to do all of our own booking, how to do our own image work, how to do a website. in ways that might not make a lot of sense in terms of a traditional pursuit of music, the industry standards. We had to build everything from the ground up. And I guess on some level, people are usually doing that. But for us, it felt very much like reinventing the wheel.
Mm-hmm. We didn't know anyone who was doing it. We didn't know we had no peers or mentors. It was just, let's do this.
Yeah. So we found people like Jamie and Shannon. We tried to actively pursue them to equip ourselves, and understand better what we were getting into. And so we've always kind of resonated with the people who are outside of the normal industry or outside of the norm in general and are doing it their own way, cutting out the middleman where they can and that sort of thing. And so that's been a real big push for us. We started our own record label, and we do our own subscription service. I contract any work that I can do out personally, so we oversee everything. It's a very entrepreneurial mindset in terms of pursuing an artistic career.
What is the subscription service that you mentioned? Are you talking about like a community support type thing, or?
Yeah, so it's if you've heard of Patreon, that's a formal structuring of a patron mindset, and so we worked really hard to build our supportive community. We have mailing lists, we have private groups, we have kind of a hierarchy of release where we're just trying to build a community that we can invite people to feel included in. And so one of the things we've made available is there's 3 different tiers of subscription where we give stuff to people. I have something called Song of the Month, and so I'll write and record a new song. We have videos re-release and in private chat groups and a weekly show on Facebook Live that I do. We call it the Bradcast.
Nice.
Essentially what we did is, rather than go through Patreon and have another middleman taking a cut, we realized that you could actually do subscription payments through PayPal. And we were like, okay, well, let's just host this on our own website rather than building a whole new thing through someone else who's going to take a portion of the money that we get. So it's a lot like Patreon, but it's a patronage hosted on Bradford's website on our own. So it's modeled after that.
I love that. That's cool. I didn't realize that, and I had spent a little time on your site this afternoon, and probably the moment, if I think back hard enough, that I saw become a patron, I might have just thought, oh, cool, they're on Patreon. So that's very cool.
Yeah. Well, patronage has been around for centuries, probably more than centuries. So the idea is ancient, and it's really cool that the Patreon people wanted to provide a platform for that. But we like to have as few people between us and the money as possible.
Have there been other aspects of taking that, keeping that in-house that you enjoy, or aspects of it that I guess Patreon would be kind of nice for that bit of it, but
yeah.
Well, Patreon allows you to do some flexibility that is difficult when you're not building the infrastructure of a website from the ground up. So there are certain things that we lose out on. But I sponsor a couple people on Patreon and or subscribe. I'm not sure what the actual right term is. But I've just found that I don't go on their website. And so it was just another thing where I'm almost less attached to what they're doing because it becomes a thing that I'm not going to go to realistically. It's just another social media site to engage. And so, and so since I'm only really on Instagram and Facebook anyways, I just do it all there and just utilize that and emails to really interact with people. So for the most part, we just try to keep it simple and give regular updates, and we try to do that with everything we do, where we're trying to keep it boiled down to what is the greatest way for this to be a relationship. And so we want to remove all the obstacles to relationship that sometimes those programs or things of that nature can really engender.
Yeah.
Sure.
One place I think that having it in-house or whatever isn't that great is with PR. There's still so many gatekeepers out there that getting through to certain areas in music, in the industry, if you don't have relationships with those gatekeepers or someone who does, it makes it really difficult to sort of move beyond, or I don't want to say get to the next level, because for some people that's not even something they're interested in, but to just get to a different place or go on a different path in your music career if you don't have access to people with those relationships or the ability to build them. So I think PR definitely is one of those areas where we're looking maybe to outsource or to bring someone, alongside. Everything is changing constantly with social media.
Sure.
And with all those areas of public relations and marketing, and even Facebook ads. You can learn to do that yourself, but it's constantly changing. And I get emails from the Facebook marketing people about new lessons and new information a couple times a week, and it's really hard to keep up. It's so much work. So definitely can see the value of having knowledgeable people behind your career in that area for sure at some point.
You're reminding me, I had a really fun conversation with a songwriter named Tony Hara, who's this week's featured guest, coincidentally. I don't often get on the subject of PR, but he just happened to drop in the beginning of our conversation that he had a publicist, and so we got into how he... I was curious and figured others might be, how he acquired the publicist. And then we got into my favorite part, actually. I asked him about crafting the emails that he sent out one night when he started looking around, and that was the most amusing part of it. But yeah, he sounds like he's found a good publicist, and I guess, as you're pointing out, Kimberly, it's about not being able to do absolutely everything on your own. So do the two of you? I'm guessing I know the answer, but I think this is a great thing to chat about for a moment or hear your thoughts on for listeners. But did the two of you think about what to do, or are you planning for what to do in the event that something changes on Facebook that's so dramatic that the part of it that you're doing there, like hosting the Facebook Live things, just like is no longer something you can do, or doesn't make any sense? And the same thing with Instagram, since they are the same company, although two different brands, and maybe one becomes entirely ineffective, but the other one stays in. But do you give thought to what happens if that happens to you, or if those changes occur?
I have, yeah. It's I don't know that we've necessarily sat down and had that discussion, but between Kimberly and I, but it's having a music career is very much like grooming your stock portfolio. You really have to diversify and make sure that you're not putting all your eggs in one basket.
Absolutely.
And while there are definitely, I'm of the generation or whatever, that Facebook is more appealing to me than the other social networks. I definitely am frustrated by certain aspects of it. So we have a pretty active Instagram presence, and I have a pretty robust YouTube presence as well. And I send out regular emails. So we try to hedge our bets and make sure that because besides the fact of what works for me, I want to make sure that I'm reaching people where they live. That's been a pretty fundamental approach for us from the beginning. Go to where the people are that want to hear you.
Right.
And that's how we approach touring. That's how we approach our social media presence, our communication, our relationship building. We try to be where the people that would listen to my music or are moved by my music go where they are.
Yeah, that's smart. And yeah, you gave a great answer that I think gives people things to think about who may not be otherwise thinking about it. I also would love to hear the two of you or either of you talk about the Facebook Lives that you do. I just, was on your timeline today, and at the very first one, you just break into song, and it looks like it's about a 50-some minute broadcast, which is also awesome. And then I gathered from looking at your timeline, and just now one of you commented, implied that it was a regular thing. How long's that been going on? What does it mean for you and your community?
How long have you been doing it?
A little over a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, we started at the end of November last year, 2017. And we do it every Monday night at 9 p.m. Here. In Nashville. That's Central Time. And I tried to, because I'm from the West Coast, originally I have a pretty solid group of relationships out that way. So we had to find a time that was late enough for them, but early enough for Central and East Coast people.
Yeah.
So that seemed to be the pocket that worked. And also, when I'm out on the road, Monday is always the hardest time to get a show. And even when I have a show on a Monday night, I'll just live stream the show. And so then it becomes a slightly different, broadcast, but it's generally between 25 minutes and an hour. We've gone a little over. It's usually closer to 25 minutes. I like to have a guest as often as I can, but it's about 40% of the time. So it just kind of depends on what we're doing and where I am. And so, I'll usually do a song, a cover song, and then I'll just kind of give an update and let people know what's going on in my world and ask them questions and, try to get interaction with them. It's a fun little show. And when we have an interview, it's pretty amazing. I try to keep it fresh and new. So sometimes it's an artist, sometimes it's a producer, it's really anybody who's doing something that I believe in. So I've had there's a guy that runs a nonprofit that sponsors nonprofits, and producers and artists and life coaches, and pretty interesting.
Yeah, that sounds cool. I didn't even gather that aspect of it being regular, the interview part. I did. I think the second one I went through, you did have a guest on there who was a podcaster. I forget his name, but it's one of your very recent ones. That's pretty cool. Do you have? I'm asking this question purely as someone who interviews people weekly and sometimes a couple times a week. But do you have a primary source of inspiration for better questions?
Oh,
he does prepare beforehand. Bradford's a very prepared person, so he has everything kind of worked out usually beforehand. And I think that I would say that you try to focus on them and what they're doing. Mm-hmm. We always ask them too before if they have anything in particular they want to talk about, so that we can make sure if they have a project they're working on, or if they are fundraising or have a big show coming up, that we can point to that to kind of tailor it to them. And then I do make sure to as well to put any links about them in a pinned comment, so that they'll always show at the top while we're talking. But as far as questions go, Dave?
Yeah, I try to ask a couple of questions of every guest. And a big part of my approach to music and entrepreneurialism is helping others. Because I walked away from music, or maybe because of the way that I walked away from music, I was just told constantly, well, you can't do that as a career. And so I tried kind of halfway, very briefly before I gave it up. And so now that have gone, both feet, leapt into the deep end, so to speak, I love it. It's the most rewarding career I've ever had. And so I'm a big believer, and so is Kimberly, of helping others to reach their potential, regardless of whatever that is. If it's music, photography, some sort of creative endeavor, or if it's just starting your own business, like why be a slave to the man? I'm a big fan of helping people do what they want to do. Our time on this rock is pretty limited. So, however I can do that, even boil down to just asking the same question of each guest, what career advice, what would you tell somebody who's starting doing what you're doing? What would you tell them? What was the best piece of advice you ever got? So I'm a big fan of that, helping people help people do what they really want to be doing.
That's cool. I like it.
One thing sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, one thing about the Facebook shows too, that just for your listeners to mention, is that it can be a little discouraging sometimes to see that, maybe only 10 people are currently live watching, but the comments and the conversations that after it's posted I really can't stress enough the importance of those things that happen after the show is posted. So even if you don't get a ton of interaction live, we do see a lot of interaction of people watching it later on their own time and commenting and answering questions and asking questions later. I feel like probably 24 to 48 hours, babe, do you think, where people are really involved in commenting on it?
Yeah, well, Facebook lets it sit there for about 24 hours looking like it's live.
Yeah.
And so people will interact with it. Yeah, that's a pretty common misnomer when you look at how many people are watching it. You basically just, I don't even look at that ever.
I notice it every time, but yeah, so just don't let that be a discouragement. If you've got 3 to 5 people watching, just realize it's going to show up in people's timelines and they will watch it and they will interact with it after. And be aware of that too, to make sure that you're going back and looking at the comments and answering them. And then that'll just keep it in the people's feeds the more that interaction happens, and it'll get more views and make you pop up more often in your followers' algorithms and stuff like that.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. Metrics are obviously important. At the same time, getting obsessed with trying to figure them out and understand Facebook can be discouraging, I'm sure. You mentioned, you used the word supporting or supportive, and I noticed that you have a Facebook group that had that language in there. What is that group about? Your private group? Or do you have multiple ones?
I have multiple ones. Yeah, so that's the most open, and that's really anybody that has expressed interest in my music.
Bradford Loomis supportive community.
Yeah, and that's anybody that's a fan. For a minute there, the ever-changing nature of Facebook, when you are part of a group, you would see every notification. Mm-hmm. And now they've started to change that, so you're only seeing the ones they want you to see. So that's made it a little bit trickier. Yeah. But I have a house show alumni group. So anyone who's ever hosted a house show is in a private group. And anybody that I have a patronage community, so anybody that's one of my patrons, they get stuff first. So I try to, I'll do little video snippets or just kind of silly things or something that I'm working on that isn't going to see the light of day for a little bit. They get to see it first. And it's just an extra way to say thank you for helping give me the financial security to pursue music. And then the house show people generally see it, and then the supportive community see it, and then the public sees it.
Cool. Someone was on my calendar this morning who I spoke to talk about house shows, or as I more frequently call them, house concerts. He had made one of his first efforts to, solicit for them, or whatever the best language is for that, and it didn't go so great. So we were just talking about different aspects of it, and he was kind of sharing with me some of the things he had encountered. So I want to ask you, what was or is or has been, maybe I should say what was your biggest source of useful information and or inspiration where it came to getting into house shows?
Well, there's a lot of different ways to do it. For us, one of my earliest exposures to house shows, there's a group in Seattle called the Seattle Living Room Shows, hosted by two sisters, Kristen and Carrie Watt. And they host an incredible series, and they've had to expand it to Seattle secret shows where they'll use kind of innovative venues because it's gotten so big. But they actually hosted a show that Shannon Curtis was playing with some other folks, and they had all gone on tour together. There was 4 of them. It was 3 different artists and a bass player, and they would all be each other's band. And I was pretty impressed with the nature of how they were doing the tour, but then also just how simple but much more comfortable a house show is. And so I really loved that. And so I played a couple shows with the Watt sisters at the Seattle Living Room Shows, and that was kind of my start. And then Jamie Hill and Shannon Curtis wrote a book, and we got into, I just kind of picked their brain. I think I picked their brain before I read their book. And they helped me to understand there's just a lot of really simple but very specific details that really help a house show be successful for everyone.
Yeah.
Not just the artist, not just the audience. But their book is really simple. It's a really quick read. And it's a great resource for understanding how house shows work. And there are certain things that they do that I don't. So you really do. It's like anything else, man. You really have to say, what is my value on this? How does this look more like me when I do it? And so we've kind of, contextualized some things to fit me and my approach. But the vast majority of stuff just makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
It's a great resource. I can't recommend it enough to artists that are looking to get into house shows. And there's a lot of house show networks, and it's like anything else. It's just another middleman that have structured something a certain way so that they get paid, and you'll make a little money too, but it's more about them making money. And so, like anything, we've really kind of approached how do we make sure that we can pursue this as a career. And that book has helped a lot because it allows you to equip yourself and focus on your community and building that community. So you're not subject to a network or somebody else's, just another gatekeeper. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well,
sorry.
No, I was just going to say that I'm really glad that your answer came out the way it did, and it came out with a little more. And in fact, probably the thing I couldn't stress enough to the guy I was talking to was go read that book that Shannon Curtis did. Go to this page on her website, and I'm looking at a page that you've set up on yours that, it starts with a section hosting a show 101, and here's your step-by-step guide to making it happen, which I love, which is likely to become another place that I'll point people to. Now, Kimberly, what were you going to add?
Well, I was just going to say that I think the impetus for house shows, hold on, I think Brad has to cough. Okay. The impetus for house shows, when Bradford's going out, and I was working when he started out of the house full-time / part-time, but when you have to bring in an income and you go out and you play shows at a bar or another venue where you're bringing home $50, but you spent $25 in gas to get there, you only have to do that a couple of times before you realize that there has to be a better way. And I think that for us was really, we had to find the way to make it work where it made sense. And he was bringing home money after every tour, and not just a little money to continue to just be able to do it, but an actual income to support the family. And so I think having that sort of fire under your feet to make sure that you get paid what you're worth finding the ways to make that happen was sort of a big reason and inspiration for us to look to house shows, because you just have to have one really successful one where people are listening, they're focused, the room is quiet, you're able to tell your stories, people are really appreciative, they're there because they want to hear you, as opposed to sometimes there's other venues that aren't listening rooms that aren't like that, and no one's listening. And then when you do it the way that we do, when you leave that sort of vessel of gratitude, as Jamie and Shannon call it, and we do as well, or is that our thing? The vessel of gratitude, when people are putting what they feel the value of your work is in there, it's so gratifying, and it is so fulfilling, because you know that that's your job, and you've now been sort of validated by that. And then you get to build all these relationships with all these people who were there, and they follow you, and you talk and you email, and it's amazing. And now you have all of these people in your corner, in your supportive community. So it's way more than just the money. But that was sort of the beginning thing for us, is how do we make this sustainable? And then out of that, now we have these relationships. It's really cool.
I'm going to take a left turn here and go back to something that we were talking about when we first started. And I think there's a little bit of logic in going back to this because of what we're talking about now. But Bradley, when you said you took a 10-year break from music, you said a couple of times at least, I had no ambition, or you had no ambition. You were still writing, but just weren't out doing whatever aspect of music you'd been doing before, which I presume meant performing and recording. When you say you had no ambition, what were you referring to specifically?
Well, I had no ambition in terms of music. I really didn't know how to pursue music. I think every musician, every songwriter is confronted with the fact that they have to create. It's not there's no maybe about it, but it doesn't always take the additional step of, okay, so how do I get paid for this? You know what I mean? It becomes almost a thing that we're afraid to even mix those two realms. There's like a purism or like a purist movement within creatives that you can't sully it by making it about money.
Yeah.
And this may sound bad, I've just never suffered from that. I walked away from music, and it was a hobby, and it was just something that I played music and was creative about. And maybe that's why I am the way I am, because I tried so many jobs that I was just terrible at, because I had to have a quote unquote day job or real job. And so when I was kind of thrown into music, I already had a wife. I already had 3 kids. So there was no time for, getting exploited or doing it for free. It had to make sense, because everything has a cost. And you feel that cost, especially so when you have a wife and kids, because anytime you're doing something, you're away from them. And so I felt that cost pretty potently. And so I was just very aware anytime that music would take me away from them, it had to make sense. And so I was driven to once I got into music again, to have it make sense, so that it could be something that made sense to take me away from them. Does that make? Am I?
Oh yes, yeah. My wife and I have an occasional similar conversation, actually related to some work that she's been doing in recent months, and there's some travel involved, and we just talk about the cost of that, which is not the cost of tickets, which are being reimbursed to her, but it's the cost of being away from one another. But so I completely understand.
Right.
And none of this. I think that certainly all of the artists that I have on here, by and large, completely appreciate what you're talking about. Nothing about it sounds bad when you say you don't suffer from that thing where you feel bad about the making a living aspect of it, because for those that are listening, because those of you that are creative and want to make music or record a podcast every week where we talk to wonderful people like Bradford, at some point you can just get burned out on it, as maybe you did, Bradford. Maybe that's kind of where that took you. And why not support yourself with it if you can, and make money and do really well if you can, because it only enables you and us to give more to our community that way. So it doesn't sound bad at all.
Oh, good. Yeah, it definitely has felt. It's the most empowering feeling I've ever had, when you're able to do what you, at your deepest level, feel like you were made to do. When you're able to make it work and figure out a way, it's pretty amazing.
I love that. Yeah, I can imagine. It's a wonderful thing. Wonderful thing. As part of that and supporting community, I also noticed that you, back in September, that's just the one I noticed, maybe you do this a lot, maybe it was a one-time thing, you led a workshop on booking shows in Nashville. Is that something that you've done since, or something you've done before, or something you regularly do?
I've hosted a couple of different things. There's a group that I'm part of here in Nashville. We call it Music Masterminds, where we just kind of lead either lead a discussion, or we teach how we do it to other artists, and we all kind of rotate and take turns based on the subject matter at hand and what we're wanting to talk about as a group. But I've taught seminars on booking, on YouTube, like overhauling your YouTube channel and optimizing your YouTube channel, as well as crowdsourcing and crowdfunding in particular, and raising funds for projects and that sort of thing. And my wife and I, has helped people establish, basically, anytime we're putting something together, we're just very public about what we do with Lineage Artistry and with my music career and with her photography. And anytime we're doing something and we're putting it out in the public and people ask questions, we always try to, that's a big part of our patron subscription, is that we, one of the aspects that people are paying for when they're subscribing to us is us helping other artists. So we've, when we launched our patron subscription, it was right around the same time Patreon had this big snafu where they had raised their rates kind of as a surprise and immediately put that onto the subscribers rather than the artist. And it made some waves and it upset some people. And so we had a lot of questions about how we do it. And so Kimberly was on Twitter weeks straight, just kind of walking people through how we do it and that sort of thing. So we always try to make sure that we are helping other artists in any way that we can, whether that's teaching classes or just being available. Try to budget that into everything we do.
So Kimberly, you were on Twitter when you were doing some of that discussion. Was that for artists who were asking how you do it because they were thinking maybe we need to do it more like you two do?
Yeah, so there was a lot of people who were, they basically what happened as a result of what Patreon did, and they went back and fixed it, but people had tons of $1 donors, people who were just donating $1 a month, drop out. And so then what people were saying was, there has to be other ways. Where can we go to do this differently, because we don't want to stay with Patreon anymore? And so my response was, at first I was just kind of responding and saying, hey, we do it differently. Let me know if you want to know how. And then I realized, okay, I have to have something to point to people. So I wrote a blog post on Lineage Artistry. That's our record label publishing company. I wrote a blog post, and I just sort of pointed people there after, writing a really clear step-by-step instruction. And then I just responded with that. I got a lot of DMs, and then I direct messages, and I would just send them to that blog post to explain how we do it. And it's not even like, and I kept having to tell people, like, we're not a consult. Like, this is free of charge. We just want you to know there's another option. You don't have to go with Patreon. You don't have to go with another online support, middleman type of situation. If you can, if you want, but here's how we do it. So it was a while. It was probably wasn't weeks. I think it was probably a week or two of lots of conversations on Twitter, just pointing people to this blog post that I wound up staying up to 3 o'clock in the morning writing that first night to make sure that people knew what their options were.
Well, that's very cool. So it's lineageartistry.com. Is that by chance where that blog post lives? Okay. Yeah. I don't know if it's super easy to find, but if it's not, okay. All right, great. So I'm going to look for that and put it in the show notes. That's very cool. And also I this is obviously, for the two of you to chime in on, but since, I was reminded that you two are very much a team in this, not too unlike Jamie and Shannon. Jamie and Shannon, excuse me. I was thinking of Crystal and Pete Demore, who I mentioned to you at the top of our conversation, also working together. Kimberly, can you talk about or both of you, can you talk about the contributions that you specifically make? It sounds like they're diverse, and I ask out of self-interest, but I also think that, like I probably already said twice now, that others would benefit from hearing about what the two of you do, because I think it's never too late in life to be thinking about, wow, what if I added a partner like this to the mix? If the opportunity were there, if I could, what could it mean? What could it mean to me? So, can you talk about your contributions to the music machine?
Yeah. Excuse me. When we've been married for 17 years, going on 18.
Congratulations.
Thank you. When you're married that long, your brain, I'll speak for myself. I basically utilize Kimberly's brain as the other half of mine. I vocalize everything. I run everything by her. She very much completes who I am and my approach to life in general. So we talk about a lot of stuff. I like to brainstorm and have planning sessions when I'm alone in my car. But I run all of those things by her. I show her, we'll make goals. I make goals separately, but then we talk a lot about it. I have a career goal list, a 5-year plan, 2-year plan, and a 1-year plan. She sees and inputs everything. When it comes down to the music, we write together. She's a great writer. But she's not she's not a musician. She doesn't play any instruments. So we write together, but she's a big part of the direction of my music career. So I do a lot of the booking on my own, a lot of the website stuff I hire out. One thing she's extremely gifted in is visual artistry. She's a photographer. She does most of my image work. And so anything that's remotely image driven, I run by her or just hand to her and let her oversee it and drive it. And so you can see all the ways that might, everything we do, everything that is part of my music career is intertwined with her and us planning together and that sort of thing. And then, of course, anything I do that's going to take me out of the house, I want to make sure she's acutely aware of, and she makes sure that it makes sense. She's kind of guarding everything, and so we're very much like, even the aspects of my career that I'm doing on my own, she's aware of, and I've run it by her. And I'm extroverted enough that I think that just in life, I feel better about the direction of something when I've spoken it. And I don't know, it's just something about talking to yourself that feels dumb after a while. So it's a lot easier if I'm talking to somebody. And so since it impacts her, and she's also a verbal processor, so she's a great partner in terms of, virtually every aspect of my career, except for the actual performing of it. That I do on my own, or I have a band, or I have musicians that I play with. But every other facet, we're kind of strategizing and planning together.
Yeah, it's pretty well interwoven. And it's hard to sort of just pick out what parts. I mean, he did a really good job just now. I'm naturally a helper. I'm naturally someone who wants to just sort of come alongside and say, okay, what can I do to be involved and to help? I really love the songwriting aspect. Words are my jam. And so when he's been stuck, and there's songs I'm not credited on where I've written the line, and I don't want to be credited on them, but he's playing on the couch and can't figure it out or needs advice or whatever, I'm there. And I'm just kind of always there. Kind of creepy, but so, and the visual aspect of it too. Yeah. I'm that's also.
She also does a lot of practical things. She's very much a great researcher, and she's super tech savvy.
Yeah.
She's done her own websites, and she does all the image work. So there's a lot of technical ways that has to make sense with the other things, like when you're putting something on a website, or when you're putting together the album art, or you're using this image for this thing. She's kind of got her fingers in everything. With the broadcast show that we do every week, it's just so much more difficult when you're looking at the phone or the camera to get the questions that people are asking you. It's just a lot simpler. She's in the background, getting the comments and responding to them, and putting the information and links up that people need to see. It just makes life a lot easier.
Yeah, I can.
It's like having a business partner that can Google stuff in bed at night before you go to sleep.
Yeah. I can imagine on the broadcast how nice it is that we've both seen, or we've all seen, Facebook Lives where the on-camera talent is also dealing with all the the comments and they're trying to versus when there's a little bit of help around, and it's kind of a pleasant difference. Not kind of, it's a pleasant difference. And not to knock anyone who doesn't have that luxury, because it's also fun to watch you do that. But I know it's got to be a little distracting.
It totally is. I tried to do it that way the first couple of times, where you respond to each message as they come in, and it's just the conversation never goes anywhere. You're constantly being sidetracked. So I wanted it to have a flow in a nice direction, but then also answer everybody. Yeah. So it's a whole lot easier if you have a partner.
Yeah. Hey, by the way, how many people, I'm switching gears again, how many people are in that music mastermind in Nashville that we touched on?
That's a great question. It's about 15 people.
Okay.
I want to say.
All right.
That's a nice size. We've got a handful in Nashville. There's one in North Carolina. There's one in Portland, Maine. There's one in Ireland, Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Harley's out in Colorado.
It's all people we know or someone else knows. Like, there's got to be a relationship,
Sure.
there with someone.
And it's all people that are taking their music career seriously.
Yeah.
And so we're all kind of sharing the load of doing research and helping each other when we have questions, and it's shared resources.
Yep. And you know what I love the smart part about it's there's some sort of relationship there that kind of avoids some other unknown things when you know them already. Yeah. So, and how often does that group convene?
just about every week. It's a little bit tough for the people who aren't in Nashville. I'm feeling a little under the weather today, but there was a work party today. So we do a work party every other week. And then in the off week, we do a formal meeting where we're streaming that to everyone else. And that will be a driven, more in
class-like.
Yeah, more, what's the word I'm trying to think of? More intentional conversation. So it's either somebody teaching a course, or like we're bringing in a representative from BMI, which is Broadcast Music International. Mm-hmm. It's a performing rights organization. So we're bringing them in, and they're going to teach just kind of on the perks and what your PRO or your performing rights organization should be doing for you. That sort of a thing. Sometimes it's one of us teaching something. Sometimes it's we bring somebody in, and it's just a very intentional class. So we do that every 2 weeks, and then we do a work meeting every other week. Does that make sense? So we do something nearly every week.
Nearly every week.
What is the work meeting? What's the format of that?
Yeah, so the work party is it's more informal. We get together at someone's house, and we had one today, which is why I brought that up, where we just kind of, everyone's working on whatever they're working on, and we might have headphones on. We might just be chatting. There's coffee, there's a breakfast, and we're just hanging out, working together on our separate projects. So that way, if you're doing something, you hit a spot where you're not sure how to do that, you can be like, oh, what do you guys do for this? So it's more conversational and hangout, but it's low-key and informal, so that way we're actually doing work. So it's kind of like a shared workspace with people that are also working on music, but it could be a completely different aspect of it.
Okay, and when we first started talking about the members, I thought that you had some that were remote, or is everyone actually in the same proximity? When you get together for the work parties, are you all located where you can all get together, or some of you meeting online?
Yeah, so that's a little tougher. The work parties are just the Nashville crew.
Okay, got it. So you do have some remotes.
Yeah, there is. It's about half and half.
Okay.
Half are in Nashville and half are kind of spread out all over the world.
Okay, cool. So
mostly in America then.
Okay. Yeah. And what are a couple of examples of the type of work that might happen at the work party that people are drilling into?
Let's see. At the last one, we had people working on their YouTube channel. A couple of people were putting together intentional, planned email replies. So when somebody joins their email list, kind of like a flow of automatic emails that kind of help people get acclimated to their system and how often they email. And so that way you're not having to write every single one of those emails by hand every single time. Somebody else was working on booking some shows, and we're all just kind of doing our thing separately, but together.
Yeah. It's great for extroverts who have a hard time getting stuff done if they're on their own. It's great for people who are doing something that the other people in the room have done a bunch, and they're just sort of starting it from scratch, or they've only done a little bit so that they know that if they have a question, they can ask. It's really cool.
Do you also, by chance, participate in songwriters groups?
You know what's funny? I don't. I know a lot of songwriters love those things, and I really like it when I get good, specific feedback on a song. I like writing with other artists, but there's something about the shared group songwriting kind of club that I don't like, and I don't know what that is exactly, other than it's weird asking for criticism.
From a lot of people that you just met or something.
Yeah, I don't know. There is a couple people in our group here in Nashville, the Music Masterminds group. They do something called a song salon, where they go together, they get together, everyone brings a song, and you play it in front of everyone, and everyone critiques the song. that kind of sounds like hell to me. I don't know why that turns me off so much, but I do know exactly why that turns me off so much. Humans are critical creatures, especially creatives. Well, I guess everyone is creative in some fashion or another, but when's the last time somebody asked for criticism and didn't get any?
Yeah, that's
Do you know what I mean? Like sometimes I feel like I'm a big fan of movies, for example. No movie goes uncriticized. Like it could be the greatest movie in the world and somebody will find something negative to say just because. Not necessarily because I actually believe that, but all it takes is one person and somebody else is like, oh yeah, I hated that too. And then it's like, did you really hate it? Or did it just, that wasn't your favorite part? So like, there's something empowering about critiquing something that isn't necessarily accurate. And to me, trying to figure out if it's accurate in the face of criticism, like, is an emotional endeavor that I'm not sure I have time for. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I was thinking at the outset of your response that you are very possibly getting a lot of you're clearly getting a lot of fulfillment in the situation that you have where writing is concerned. You work with Kimberly, and then you mentioned that you work with other artists, and then you have this, arguably non-writing space that you share with other musicians. And I suspect that your needs are being so well fulfilled. It's like, I don't really see the appeal of adding that where I got to go do this criticism thing.
I was going to say that. Yeah, he's got a really close-knit group of people we trust that know him and know us well enough that if we need insight or if he needs insight on a song, we know someone's not just coming up with something for the heck of it. So I think you're probably right on with that.
Well, I work with incredible writers out here that in the positive way, you get to see them work and you get to see their genius. And that to me is the positive side of the critique, that no one's critiquing my creation, but I'm getting the encouragement of seeing someone else excel. And so it's, you know what I mean? It's like, it's the positive side of teaching. I get to see somebody else be genius, and then you want to aspire to that. So I get a lot of that. And Nashville is very unique in that sense that there's everyone and their mother out here, right? And so I've got a great group of musicians that I write with on a regular basis. So I'm getting the best of both worlds, I believe.
Even our daughter's in a songwriting club at school.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness! Wow, it's pervasive in Nashville. I have to come visit sometime. Yeah. I have. Go ahead.
She's in 6th grade.
That makes it even better.
Songs.
Makes it even better. It hadn't occurred to me that the sentiment that you have exists for songwriting groups, but it makes perfect sense that it would for a lot of people. And I have been a little excited lately to share the fact that I have attended a couple of writers' workshops recently. But this workshop is for writers of fiction and poetry, by and large. And I have no plans to write fiction, but never say never, I suppose. However, I am constantly having to write, and like you said, everyone's a bit of a creative, and certainly in writing to an audience, a specific audience, especially one that you want to grow and support and serve, being creative is important. There was I guess mostly I just wanted to mention that there is a particular method of writing that was incorporated in this particular writer's workshop that I went to, and I'm hoping I can find it because I'm sitting here talking about it, because I wanted to share it. I know now it's looking like I'm not going to find it. I'm going to look one more place though. Yeah, I'm not gonna spend time trying to find it. I'll put it in the show notes though, and the reason maybe it is a nice alternative for someone who just wants to nurture their writing chops that I believe could be lent to song, no problem. It is a method that honors the work of the people that are in the in-person group, and it is to really talk about the positive aspects of it. So, so there's not a lot of those demoralizing things that happen. In fact, there's none at all. So,
I've been to a couple of writers' workshops too, because I do that as well, and I love them. I think they're great for the kind of thing that I like to do as well. So, I mean, it just sort of depends on, I think, on your personality and on what you're working on, and what you kind of need in the moment, and your ability as well to take things with grains of salt and not give the people who you're working with so much power over you that you allow them to influence you beyond what you want to allow them to.
Yeah.
There's a great methodology for writing that is practiced out here by some people, and it's called Say Yes. And so if you don't say yes, if you don't say something affirmative, then it's a no. And I there's something about that that's kind of cool, and I don't know if it's just because I'm from the Pacific Northwest and there's a lot of passive aggressiveness out there. but there's, like if you're timid about that, or if that's a sensitive issue, because it really is a vulnerable thing, writing with somebody else. And if somebody comes up with an idea and you're like, oh my God, that's horrible. Like that is not where I saw this song going. That really, I don't know that that's ever happened to me, but if something were to happen like that, to have that basis of like, oh, I don't have to crush them or, like dash their hopes, with a, like, I don't like that and here's why, you know what I mean? This is kind of an interesting methodology that I hadn't really ever heard about. So that's kind of neat.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point about it being a vulnerable place to be in, because I can tell you, I'm not too timid about writing for people, but others that I was at the workshop with, some of them are doing it for the first time, and you can, the trepidation, I guess is a good word, is palpable, especially when it gets to we're sharing our work. We don't have to. That's the nice thing about it, but we're sharing our work with one another and with the workshop leader. So therein lies the big vulnerability, right? But they know leading up to it that it's not going to be, there's not going to be, criticism. We're going to talk about the things that are working. And I did find what I wanted to share here, because I do encourage anyone who's a songwriter or creating anything, who's just kind of looking for ways to get the, as they say, creative juices going, or sort of stretch the creative muscles. It's called the Amherst Writers Method, and there's a website that talks about it, amherstwriters.org, and the philosophy there. So I'll put that in the show notes. But yeah, it's pretty cool. It's the only one I've been to, but I'm like, I like the method, and I'm really lucky that the person that ran it is really great at it too. So all right. We have to wrap this up, I know. So let me see if I have something important here. Correct. 1 second. I know I do. But while I'm looking for that, again, I don't usually do this, by the way. I want to thank both of you for spending time with me today. It's been a pleasure and very insightful. But what I did want to say is, and tell me if this is not 100% right, but BradfordLoomis.com is the hub for all things Bradford Loomis online, and that's Bradford as you would expect it to be spelled, and Loomis is Loomis. And I also think it is worth looking at lineageartistry.com as well, as a spoke for some pretty cool things as well. Did I get that right?
Yeah, you did. Thank you.
Yeah, very cool. I so enjoyed our conversation. I will definitely be speaking with you again very soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
I can see the valley. I can see the road we used to climb. I can see the mountains leaving on the other side. And on and on and on and on and on. But I can hear the echo. I can hear the songs we used to sing. I can feel that distance living in the in-between. and on and on and on and on it goes. And on and on and on and on it goes. All these mornings get lost inside my head. Carry on to find strength in your eyes. Every fray we fought, all the things we've lost, makes us stronger in time as we caught the other side. Can you hear the rhythm? Can you feel our hearts begin to beat? We're rising from the ashes like a train that's gathering steam. And on and on and on and on we go. The canyon fire we shed low. All these mornings get lost inside my head. Carry on to find the strength in your eyes. Every fray we fought, all the things we've lost, makes us stronger in time as we cross the great divide. Every time we were close to giving up, when the weight of the world was bearing down on us, you kept your hand in mine. All these mornings get lost inside my head. Carry on to find the strength in your eyes. Every fray we fought, all the things we lost, makes us stronger in time as we cross the great divide. Oh, as we cross the great divide. Oh, as we cross the great divide.
Hey, thanks for listening. Question for you. Are you struggling to move your music journey forward? I can help. If not personally, then by referring you to the next best available resources. Schedule a free 15-minute call with me to find out if I can indeed help you. It's easy. Just visit unstarvingmusician.com/coaching to schedule your call today. Look for links to just about everything covered in this episode in the show notes at unstarvingmusician.com/podcast. This episode was powered by the Unstarving Musician's Guide to Getting Paid Gigs, how to get booked and paid what you're worth over and over again. It's available on paperback, Kindle, and ebooks just about everywhere you can find them. It's also available as a standalone podcast called the Unstarving Musician's Guide podcast. You can learn more about the book and companion podcast at unstarvingmusician.com/book. I'd love it if you picked up a copy and would love it even more if you left a review. With much gratitude, peace, love, and more cowbell.